Welcome to How to Make Final Fantasy XI Beautiful 2021 Edition. Now in this video, we'll go over the system requirements for what it is we're about to do. I'll show you the install and configuration of Final Fantasy XI. We'll show you how to install Windowers 4, DGVoodoo, and Reshader, and then we'll finish with how to install texture modifications. Now it's important to start with system requirements, because these days you can run Final Fantasy XI on virtually any computer. However, the modifications we're about to go over definitely require a higher-end gaming system, and I wanted to make sure everyone had a proper expectation of which kind of system they should be using if they're going to put into effect these changes. First and foremost, this is designed to only work with the official version of Final Fantasy XI with a current subscription. This will not work on most, if not all, private servers. In regards to the processor selection, make sure you have an Intel i7 processor or the AMD equivalent or newer. And a newer generation processor is, of course, highly recommended in this case, as the newer generation, the faster it's naturally going to be. In regards to memory, you want to make sure you have at least 4 gigabytes of memory if you're going to put these changes into effect, with 8 gigabytes being the recommended amount. Now, just in case you're unaware of what your current machine specs are, in order to get these two statistics, go ahead and right-click on the Start menu in the lower left-hand corner, and then click on System. Then look up here underneath Device Specifications, and you should see your processor and installed RAM listed right here. The next specification we need to check is our video card. This is arguably the most important one. You need to make sure that you have at least an NVIDIA 780 or higher minimum, and I really recommend an NVIDIA 1080 or higher or AMD equivalent. In order to check what kind of graphics card you have, make sure you're looking at the desktop of your computer, and then right-click on any empty area on that desktop and go to Display Settings. Now the first thing we want to check, and the most important, is this scaling option. It must be set at 100% or our changes later will not look right. Next, click on Advanced Display Settings. Here we'll be able to see the video card that is used and which monitor it's connected to. You'll also see your current resolution, which will become very important to know as we configure all of these tools. Now in regards to resolution, let's quickly spend a moment on that. Now all the changes I'm about to go over are designed for two main resolutions, 1920 by 1080 or 4K resolution. Other 16 by 9 resolutions will work as well, but note that ultra-wide resolutions have a variety of issues with the tools that are currently available for Final Fantasy XI, and how many of these changes will still work on your setup, you will often get some negative side effects such as some stretching on your screen. I've gone ahead and put up what the standard 16 by 9 and ultra-wide resolutions are there on the right-hand side so that you know which side of these two you fall under. Now, if the resolution you have on your setup is different from one of the ones listed here, it's just going to be kind of hit and miss of whether or not it's going to work and how exactly it's going to look. All you can really do is try it. On the plus side, all of these changes can easily be undone if you're unhappy with the final result. The last item we'll talk about is a recommendation, not a requirement, and that is that you have a solid-state drive for storing all of the game and texture files that we're about to be loading. Now, this is going to drastically speed up your zone times and the overall load time of the game, but not much else. So it's not completely necessary, but it definitely makes things much smoother. Now, it goes without saying, but of course I do want to point out that all of the references that I'll be making to how it is you're going to do these things is in reference to the latest version of Windows 10. If you're on some other operating system, you're going to have to do these equivalent operations on whatever operating system that is. Now, not everyone is tech savvy, so you may be unsure if your particular CPU or graphics card are fast enough or meet the requirements that I'm speaking of here. I have an easy way for you to determine this. Go ahead and Google the word Passmark, P-A-S-S-M-A-R-K, followed by the model you found for the processor or video card in the previous step. For example, I would Google Passmark i9-10900K, as that was my processor, or Passmark GeForce RTX 2070 Super, as that was my graphics card. When you click on the top result in Google, it will pull up a score for your processor or CPU. Now the minimum and recommended score that you want are listed below. And on the right-hand side, you can see some examples of me doing some searches for my particular hardware and what the results are that come back. The page you see when you do your search should look similar. Now that we've discussed system requirements, let's go ahead and move on to how it is we install and configure Final Fantasy XI to begin with. Now first you need to purchase Final Fantasy XI. There are two locations to do this. One is the Square Enix store, and the other one is the Steam store. Normally the cost is $30, but they are commonly on sale for only $10. Links to both of these will be in the video description. Now if you buy the Steam version, you will install the application through the Steam application just like all of your other Steam games. Now make sure you note which library that you install it to and the path of that library. Now anytime during this tutorial that I mention go to your Play Online or Final Fantasy XI folder, it will be in this library that I'm mentioning under the Steam Apps common folder that you will go to. The default location for Steam to put things is C, Program Files x86, Steam, Steam Apps, Common. So if you haven't changed the default setting, more than likely that's where you'll find your Play Online and Final Fantasy installs if you have a Steam version of the game. Now I do not have a Steam version of the game, so this is going to be the limit to the guidance that I can give in regards to that version. Now the other place to get it from, and the place that I normally go, is the Square Enix site itself. You want to download the install package and the 4 RAR files from the Enix site. Make sure to download all 5 of these links that you see on your screen here. Link to this page is in the video description. Now these files will take from 15 minutes to a few hours to download depending on your internet connection. Once all of them are downloaded, you can run the FFXI full setup _us.part1.exe file by double-clicking on it. Now running this file will unpack all of the installation files into a single directory. Now I normally just leave the default selected as it's just a temporary location, but if you want to store these files for later use, then select the folder where you would like to store them here. It will now unpack all of those files into this directory. This may take a few minutes. Now once the files are unpacked, you want to go inside of the FFXI full setup _us subfolder, and then double click on FFXI setup.exe. Next, it's going to ask you which components you want to install. Put a checkbox in all 3 of these items, and then select Install. It will now install all 3 components of DirectX, Play Online, and Final Fantasy XI. It will start with DirectX and require you to hit Finish at the end of this installation. It will then automatically begin the Play Online Viewer installation. Now for the Play Online Viewer installation, all you will have to do is accept the license agreement and select the location it is you wish to install it. I normally will install it in the default location, but if you have another drive or location you'd like to install it, you can change that here. You will also want to uncheck this Create a Desktop Shortcut button, as this is not how we will launch Play Online Viewer. Click Install and wait the short period of time for it to finish, and then click Finish. Next, we are going to install Final Fantasy XI itself. Now this installation will start by itself. You once again need to accept the license agreement. After the licensing screen, you'll have to hit Next again. Now here's where you can change the path which we're installing Final Fantasy. I recommend you leave this default the way it is, but again, that is unless you need to install it to a different drive, in which case, go ahead and change this to the drive you need to install it to. Just like before, uncheck the Create Desktop Shortcut and hit Next to start the installation. Now this may take a few minutes, so let's go ahead and speed it up. Once install is finished, simply click on Finish and Final Fantasy XI has been installed. Now next, I'm going to go through all the configuration options in the default version of Final Fantasy XI, as many of them need to be set in a specific way in order for later changes to take effect. Now there are 2 places that we need to set the default settings for Final Fantasy. The first is outside of the game. You want to go to the Start menu, and then to All Apps. Then scroll down to the P's for Play Online, and then click on Final Fantasy XI Config. That will open the screen you see here. Now the first thing we want to do is set the resolution to whatever it is resolution that we saw earlier. In my case it's 1920 by 1080. If you're on 4K, you want 3840 by 2160. And of course if you're on some other resolution, you should find it in this list and select it. The UI size should be set to the smallest on the scale. Image quality set to Ultra. Uncheck Play Opening Movie at Startup. And then underneath screen settings, make sure underneath window mode you have borderless window selected. Make sure the brightness slider is in dead center. Next, let's move on to the graphics tab. Here, we want to make sure drawing precision is twice what our resolution is. So if it's 1920 by 1080, you want to select 3840 by 2160, and obviously if it's 4K, you would be selecting 7680 by 4320. Make sure Maintain Aspect Ratio is selected, and you should already see textures, 2D mapping, fonts, and vegetation movement on the highest setting. You also want to make sure that draw distance and enhanced shading are both checked. Once you are certain that all your settings are set correctly, go ahead and skip over the Features tab and go to the other tab, which is where we'll be changing the next items. Now in this tab we can affect the number of sounds we hear. You want to make sure that you slide this bar from 12 all the way up to 20 so that you can hear as many sounds as possible. Now when Final Fantasy is minimized, if you want its sound to continually play through your speakers, check this box. That will be it for the Final Fantasy XI config screen. Go ahead and click on Close. It will ask you to save. Click Yes, and then now this has completed our out of the game configuration. Now we want to go into the game to configure the rest of the settings. Now since we didn't create shortcuts in the desktop, the first time you want to open Play Online, you want to go to the Start menu, All Apps, then the P's underneath the Play Online folder, and then click on Play Online. This will open up Play Online, which the first time you open it, will need to update it. So if you have just installed Final Fantasy and Play Online for the first time, you will need to go through this process, which should only take a few minutes. Now following this brief update process is where it'll give you the option to either create a new account if you've never played Final Fantasy XI before, or to sign into your existing Play Online account, which is what most people will be doing. I'll of course select that option for Play Online members and then enter my account information. After entering it, I'll be allowed to log into Play Online and start Final Fantasy XI. You will then be allowed to log into the game and modify the in-game Final Fantasy config settings, which is what we need to do next. Okay, and here we are logged into the game for the first time. In order to modify the configuration menus in the game, you want to go to your Commands menu, go right once, and then select Config. The first menu we want to modify is Gameplay. You want to make sure that the gamma adjustment for R, G, and B is set right in the center, just like we did for brightness. Next, we're going to want to go to the Windows menu, and here's where you're going to have options depending on how you want your particular GUI to look. Now all the options we're about to discuss underneath the Windows menu have to do with the way the battle and chat log is going to look and display on your screen. Normally, the multi-window mode is off, which means all of the stuff goes to a single display window. You have the option of splitting it into two separate windows in a vertical arrangement, meaning one is on top of the other, or a horizontal arrangement, which meaning one is on the left and then one is on the right. Now how you display your logs is entirely personal preference, but I have found that it's best to use the vertical option when you are using a 4K resolution, and it's best to use the horizontal option when you're using the 1920 by 1080 resolution. In regards to the rest of the options on this screen, timestamp will put a timestamp on every log entry in the log, window type will change the background of the logs, and window effect will change the animation that you just saw when a log opens or closes. Next, let's discuss the options under the Window 1 and Window 2 menus. Both of them have reactive window sizing as the top option. This is what allows the logs to get smaller the more time goes on after a particular log entry has entered the log. You usually want to leave this on. Maximum lines displayed will be the most lines it'll display as the log fills up. Minimum lines is the minimum. Window width is, of course, how wide that particular window is. And resize time has to do with reactive window sizing, and that is the length of time it takes before the window starts shrinking itself. You'll have to go ahead and play with all these options for both Window 1 and Window 2 to get them set up just the way you want. With that said, we're going to be making a lot of changes to your GUI that may influence how big you want these windows to be and what their location is. Therefore, I recommend you just get the initial setup done for your windows and then move on. Let's go ahead and move on to the next setting that may affect graphics, which is underneath the Miscellaneous menu. Here, you can select where the damage is displayed for the particular mobs that you're fighting. It can be simply in the log, just on the screen, or both. Personally, I prefer just the log so it doesn't muddy up all the nice graphics on the screen, but this is a personal preference option that you can select any of. The next one you want to select is Shadows. Make sure this is selected of High, Weather Effects on, Character Models displayed at the maximum, Icon Type should be at 2, and PC Armor Display should be set at normal so that you can see the pretty animations from armor. Underneath Main 2, Clipping Plane should be at maximum, Footstep Effects on, Animation Frame Rate maximum, Keyboard size is going to depend on your particular setup. Background aspect ratio is extremely important. You'll notice that by default this is set at 4:3. We want to of course change this setting to our current aspect ratio of 16:9. Note, if you have one of the resolutions I didn't list, it's possible you have a different aspect ratio, For instance, the aspect ratio for 1920 by 1200 is 16 by 10. So make sure if you have a different resolution, you look up what the proper aspect ratio is on Google. You will also note there is no aspect ratio for ultra widescreen monitors, one of the main reasons why they don't work that well, as ultra wide is 21 by 9. The rest of the options are personal preference, but I would normally leave the key assignment at default, macro palette size at full, and macro palette position at dynamic. The next menu we will go to is Miscellaneous 3. And this menu has several incorrect settings at the default, so you want to pay attention to it. You want to make sure that all of these settings are set to on, and that the style lock is set to normal. Now the remaining 4 options I want to discuss are all optional. The first one is camera view. Now if you set this to chase cam, the camera is going to constantly try and reorient itself behind you, and if you set it on normal, it will continually put it wherever it is and kind of give you free movement of it. I prefer it on normal, but some people do prefer the chase cam, so you can definitely play with this setting to see which you prefer. The next one that's really important is screen edge panning. If you put your mouse on one side of the screen, you'll notice that it'll normally spin around in circles, which can annoy some people, especially if they have multiple monitors like myself. Therefore, you can turn screen edge panning off, and when the mouse is on the far left or right of the screen, it will no longer spin. By default, this is on, so if you don't want it spinning when your mouse is on the left or right, make sure you turn it off. The last 2 settings are underneath global. The first one is the language filter setting. This will filter out, of course, anything it deems as offensive or nasty language. I would normally turn this off. It is on by default. And then the second one is the idle timeout setting that will automatically log you out if you've been idle for a certain period of time. I always set this to off as well. That'll be it for the in-game configuration settings. Your Final Fantasy XI is now configured to look the best it can out of the box. What we are going to do now is add all kinds of third-party and aftermarket tools in order to enhance the way that it looks. The first of these tools is Windower 4, and it'll be the next topic we cover. Now before we install Windower 4, we first need to download it. Please go to windower.net. There you will find this page. You want to click on the Download Windower 4.3 Stable Release, that big green button, and that will download windower.exe. Now this is very important. Do not run windower.exe from your browser or from the Downloads folder, as this is the full exe and will actually execute the Windower application from here. So instead, you want to copy by right-click on it and going to the copy command, and then browsing to where it is we want Windower 4 to be. Normally, I would recommend you just put it underneath C, Program Files, x86. Right-click on any blank area here, go to New Folder, call it Windower 4, go inside of that folder. Now right-click anywhere in that empty area inside the folder and go to Paste, and this should paste that file right inside of that Windower folder like you see here. You also may have noticed that it asked me for administrator permissions in order to do this. Most people should be administrators over their own machines, but if for whatever reason you're not, you will need to provide administrator credentials when doing this step. One other very important thing to keep in mind is the size of the disk where you're putting this Windower 4 application. It's going to house all of the textures that you're going to use that will enhance the experience of Final Fantasy XI. You are going to need anywhere from 10 to 50 gigs of space for all of the textures that we're going to install, depending on the options you pick later in this video. So make sure your C drive has this extra space available. Additionally, if you're in a situation where your SSD device or your solid state drive is another drive other than C, then make sure you're installing this there as opposed to on the C drive, as having these textures load off an SSD is exponentially faster than off a traditional spindle drive. If indeed you do need to put it on one of those other drives, simply making a subfolder of Windower 4 and putting it directly underneath the D drive, for instance, is acceptable and will work just fine. Now that we have put windower.exe in its Windower 4 subfolder, we double-click on windower.exe, which automatically runs the Windower 4 program and puts in all of the subfolders and files that are necessary for its operation. Once it finishes downloading all of the add-ons, plugins, and extra resources that it needs, it will bring you to the standard Windower 4 menu. Now you can create multiple profiles here, but the standard default profile is usually just fine. Next, we need to configure Windower 4. To do so, you click on the Edit icon in the lower left-hand corner. On the Windower tab, the first thing we want to check is that the resolution is set to the same resolution that we've set everything else to. In this case, 1920 by 1080. We also want to make sure that the window mode is set to borderless window. On the Game tab, we want to make sure that hardware mouse is off, sound is on. The always play sound setting denotes whether or not, once Final Fantasy XI has been minimized, whether its sound continues to play. I turn this off. You can make that decision for your own particular setup. MIP mapping goes to none. UI scale should be at the very bottom as well at 1x. And gamma, just like we set it before, should be right in the middle. Now you want to have always enable gamepad to off, that is unless you're using a controller. And bump mapping should always be off as it will interfere with our later changes. Now super sampling should normally be on, but there are certain setups that this has been known to cause an issue on. So if you finish all of our changes and then notice kind of a graining effect in Resenma or are having issues, try disabling this and then going back into the game to see if that resolves your problem. The last thing you want to do is click on the pin icon right here to send a shortcut to your desktop. Now when you double click on this shortcut, the game will automatically launch. Next, we need to set up some items before we can continue on with the rest of our video. The first thing we need to do is have you go to my GitHub page. The URL will be in the description. Once there, it'll look just like this page. Click on Code and then Download Zip. It'll download quickly. Once downloaded, right-click on it, go to Extract All, accept the defaults, and just hit Extract. This will cause it to extract the local downloads folder and then automatically show you the contents. Double-click on FFXI Beauty Master, then right-click on Init.txt, go down to Copy, click on Copy. Now what you want to do is browse to where it is you installed Windower 4. In our case, C, Program Files, x86, Windower 4. You now want to go to the Scripts directory, and in there you will see also an Init.txt file. You want to right-click inside of this folder, and then go to Paste. It will ask you if you want to replace the file. Click Yes. It'll ask you if you have permissions. Hit Continue, and you should be all set. Next, I want to show you two quick shortcuts we should set up. First, right-click on Windower.exe, and then go to Pin to Start. This will pin it to your Start menu so that you can easily launch Windower.exe anytime to change the specific settings and configuration that we're changing here. If you simply want to launch the game, go ahead and use that icon that's on your desktop. Now you're going to be interacting a lot with this Windower 4 folder for the rest of this video. So to make life easy on yourself, I suggest you go up one folder, right-click on Windower 4, and go to Pin to Quick Access. Now if you scroll up on the left-hand side, you will see a Windower 4 directory underneath your Quick Access menu, making it easy to get to at any time and making it so you don't have to drill down through the C, Program Files, etc., etc. This can be especially useful for Steam users. Now the next thing we're going to do is not entirely necessary, but I definitely strongly recommend it because last year when I didn't have people do this, it did cause some complications. I recommend you go and download something called Notepad++. Simply type it into Google and you should see a page of notepad-plus-plus.org. On this page, it's very simple. Just click on what is currently the 7.9.5 release or click on whatever the most current one is. You can download either the installer or the portable version. The installer makes your life easiest. Once downloaded, go ahead and run the Notepad++ installer, and then go through the menus of OK, Next, I agree. On the next screen, you can select where it is you want to install it. Normally the default of the x86 directory is fine. All of the options are correct, so hit Next. We do not want a shortcut on our desktop, so hit Next, and then Finish, and this will run Notepad++. Now this application will make your life much easier as we modify all of the settings in the text files in the remainder of this video. It also has the added benefit of putting itself in administrator mode if necessary, making it so you can modify files that you otherwise could not. Now let's use this Notepad++ application to open up that init.txt file that we just replaced. To do so, go to File, Open. In the Open window, go ahead and scroll up to the Quick Access menu on the left and then click on Windower 4. Now double-click on the Scripts subfolder, and then double-click on init.txt. Here's the file that we just downloaded. Now all of this stuff that's above the NEXTGame edits are things that are just supposed to make your Windower 4 work correctly and set up all of your key mappings, so you can simply ignore that. Things below NEXTGame edits are what we are going to end up modifying during the rest of this video, so that's where you're going to need to focus your attention, on line 61 and below. Now in front of each one of these commands, you will notice dual slashes. This makes it so the command does not execute. As we go through the rest of this video, I will ask you to remove these slashes from in front of certain commands when it's time to activate them. Let's now move on to the first modification that we're going to make, uncapping the frames per second. In order to do that, you just simply need to remove the slashes in the space from in front of two commands. Remove it from in front of wait 30, and then remove it from in front of config space frame rate divisor 1. Then go to File, Save. You'll notice right here that this file cannot be saved and it may be protected. It's offering to open up Notepad++ in administrator mode, which is exactly what we want. Hit yes, it will reopen, and now once again go to File, Save, and it will not have that complication. Now let's go ahead and log into the game and see what this change has gotten us. Here we are back in the game, and two important features have been activated that are difficult to tell from the naked eye. So let's go over both. The first is ambient lighting. I just turned it off and back on again. The ambient lighting will make certain areas darker when they don't have light sources, and other areas much brighter when they do have light sources. Though this may seem subtle, it definitely creates a much more realistic and natural look in almost all areas. It also makes it so that when you highlight NPCs, they now blink, which creates a nice effect. If you end up in a zone that you personally find too dark, or you want to see the change that happens when you turn this on and off, all you have to do is hit the F11 key. The next thing we're going to talk about is FPS. Normally the game is capped at 30 frames per second. Pressing the F12 key will make the frames per second appear in the upper right hand corner. As you can see, they are currently at 57.4 frames per second. That is what we achieve by setting our frame rate divisor to 1 in that Init.txt file. Now you will see if we manually set our frame rate divisor here to 0, it uncaps our FPS and it goes all the way up to 127 FPS. Likewise, if we set our frame rate divisor to 2, it once again caps it at 30 frames per second. Now I don't really see a reason to go to 0 frame rate divisor, as most of the time you can't even reach 60 frames per second in most areas. So I would recommend just keeping it at the 1 setting that we set up in the Init.txt file, and that will give you the best overall experience. I also want to point out that we put a wait 30 command before this frame rate divisor command inside of that Init.txt file that we just modified. What this basically means is it's going to wait 30 seconds before it executes this command. Therefore, it'll be 30 seconds before your frame rate is uncapped from 30 to 60. Keep this in mind. The main reason this was done is because other add-ons and plugins can interfere with the frame rate divisor line, and as long as it executes last, it takes care of this issue. The next issue we're going to deal with is blinking. Anytime you change weapons or an ammo piece, you blink on your screen. For Ninja, this means you're basically blinking the entire time. This can be quite frustrating for both you and the healers around you. The best way to resolve this very annoying issue is to use DressUp, which emulates Blink Me Not functionality. What does that all mean? Well, basically means it freezes you into one set of gear when you zone into a particular area, so that it doesn't change from that gear until you zone into another area, therefore making it so this annoying blinking issue does not occur. The first change we need to make in order to activate this is to go back to our init.txt file and activate another line of code. This time we'll want to remove the double slashes and space before the DU blinking all on line. Once those are removed, go to File and hit Save to save your progress. Next, I need you to open the Windower 4 application and go to the Add-ons menu. Then scroll down to the Ds and find DressUp. Click the down arrow to download it and make sure that it's marked on. Now you can go ahead and launch the game and we'll see what this has gained us. As you can see, this change worked beautifully, and we are no longer blinking when we are changing our ammo or weapons. Note this is a visual change on your system only. Therefore, other players are still going to see you blink. If they want to freeze the way everyone looks and be able to have an easier time doing things like healing you and others, they also need to use the DressUp add-on, so make sure to spread the word. As far as your visual settings go, now that we have these settings in place, you should never see yourself or another member of your party blink again. There is some more neat functionality built into DressUp that I wanted to show you really quick, and that is if you type in //du space self space race space whatever race you want to be, it will change the visual display of your character to that race. Likewise, If you type //du space self space face space and then a number between 1 and 8 followed by A or B, it will change you to that race and the face that you have selected. Note this is a visual change only. None of your stats or anything will change. This is just the way you're shown on your screen. And no one else in the world can see the change either. Therefore, making this change is really just a preference of how you want to visually see yourself in the game. We are now going to take a break from the Windows 4 setup and configuration and configure a different utility called DGVoodoo. You can get to DGVoodoo 2's download site by following the link in the description of the video or by searching DGVoodoo 2 download to bring you to a site like this where you want to download again the latest stable version, which at this time is version 2.74.1. Once downloaded, you want to right click on it and then extract all, just like we have done before. Again, accept all the defaults and hit extract. This will go ahead and extract it to your downloads folder and open it up for you immediately. Now we're going to need to copy some things out of here. First, right click on the DGVoodoo.exe file and go to copy. You now need to browse to that Play Online folder that we identified during our Final Fantasy XI installation step. For us, that is in Program Files x86, Play Online, then Square Enix, then Play Online Viewer. Right-click inside of this folder, paste, then hit Continue to give permission, if asked, and the exe is installed. Now we need to go back to that extraction folder under Downloads, so go ahead and double-click on the DGVoodoo extracted folder, and inside of here, you want to go to the MS subfolder. Inside of here, you will see 4 files. Hit Ctrl-A on your keyboard to highlight all of them, then right-click, copy, and then now we need to go back to that Play Online folder that we had pasted the DGVoodoo executable into, and paste these files right alongside them. After pasting those files, DGVoodoo is installed. This is a much easier installation process than it used to be, and if you had problems with last year's procedure, this one should give you much fewer problems. Once all of these files are inside of this Play Online directory, double-click on DGVoodoo cpl.exe and it will open this window. Now the first thing you need to do here is click on the Add button because we now need to point DGVoodoo at this Play Online directory. Go ahead and point to the Play Online directory now for a 3rd time and then hit Select Folder. Now on the plus side, the majority of the rest of DGVoodoo settings, the defaults are already correct, so we only have to change a few things. Normally everything on this initial screen is correct, so the next tab that you want to click on is the DirectX tab. Here, you will want to change the VRAM to the highest that you have available, which is usually the amount that you have in your video card, and then additionally change the resolution to the same resolution setting that we have set all of our other settings to during this tutorial. Once this is finished, go ahead and hit Apply. One thing I will point out though is we're going to leave this DGVoodoo watermark box checked, as it is how we are going to verify whether or not our changes were successful. Go ahead and double-click on the pol.exe file directly underneath this Play Online Viewer folder, and it should launch Play Online for you, and immediately in the lower right-hand corner it should be apparent that DGVoodoo is running by the colorful watermark. If it is, you can go ahead and close Play Online Viewer, then reopen DGVoodoo, uncheck the watermark box, and then go ahead and hit Apply or OK. Once out, go ahead and launch POL again, and you should quickly notice that the watermark is gone, but on the plus side, DGVoodoo is still running. Go ahead and close out a Play Online Viewer, and we will now move on to the next phase, Reshader Install and Configuration. To get Reshader, you will want to go to reshade.me. At this page, you will want to click on the download button that is near the top in the middle of the picture. Once you do, it will automatically scroll you down the page to the download section where you can download what is the current version of Reshade 4.9.1. So DGVoodoo took our old DirectX that was coming from Final Fantasy XI and updated it to the present day DirectX 11. Now Reshader is going to utilize that DirectX 11 to put in all kinds of effects for us. Once it's finished downloading, go ahead and double-click on the reshade_setup file that is in your download folder. Then click here to select a game and manage its Reshade installation. On the next screen, don't bother waiting for it to find your game. Just simply click on Browse, and then browse to that same Play Online folder that I keep having you go to. Once there, select the pol.exe file, and then hit Open. Next, you will need to select Direct 3D 10/11/12. On the next screen, you will want to make sure that Standard Effects, Suite FX, and then at the very bottom, Legacy is checked. Next, click OK. Now we're going to need to select the individual components from these different packages that we want. Now you can just leave them all checked if you want, but it can make it difficult to find the ones that you actually want to modify. Therefore, I recommend unchecking them all and then selecting only the following options: Levels, Luma Sharpen, and Vibrance. None of the other ones in this initial one should be checked, and then you can go ahead and click OK. In the next screen, the only one you want checked is Clarity. Now I'm going to go ahead and leave several of these other ones checked here just so you kind of see what the odd things are that they do, but I recommend you uncheck all. Make sure then that Levels and Vibrance is checked, and then absolutely go up there and check Clarity. After that, go ahead and click the OK button, and the installation should finish. At this point, the installation of Reshader is finished. We have now finished installing all of our tools. Well done. Go ahead and click the X button in the upper right hand corner of this window, and we're going to go ahead and launch Play Online to make sure that Reshader loads up. Let's go ahead and see if that happens. Play Online is now loading, and as soon as it opens, it should be apparent that Reshader has worked, as you should see a new menu at the top part of your screen. If you hit the Home key, it will start a tutorial. Go ahead and click on Skip Tutorial, and then log into the game. Once logged in, the first thing you want to make sure you do is hit the Home key to bring up the menu, then go to the Settings menu. The Home key is a poor choice as it's used for movement on most keyboards. So I would select the Overlay key menu here, and then choose the tilde as your option, as that isn't used for anything else. Additionally, I would select the Effect toggle key and select Pause for this option so that you have an effect key that will toggle on and off all of your Reshader effects. Now, go to the Home menu, and that's where we configure the rest of our settings. Now under that Home menu is where we'll turn on and off all of our Reshader effects. Now if you unchecked all, then you should have much fewer than I have here. The first thing I'd like you to do is check Levels. This should change most of the colors on your screen to be more vibrant. Next, Vibrance, which additionally will enhance those colors, but won't be quite as noticeable yet. The next, Luma Sharpen, will brighten all of the different light sources in the room. And the last one, Clarity, will make all of the images much more clear as you see them. Note, some of these things won't quite look as impressive until we get the high quality textures installed. Now, I'll go ahead and just kind of turn on some of these other things that I suggested you didn't install, just to kind of show you an idea of what else Reshader can accomplish. Some of them good, some of them not so good. Also note that the options for each one of these individual plugins can be modified down there at the lower part of the screen. I find the defaults work just fine for all 4 of the ones that I recommend, but go ahead and play with them as you wish and see what works for your taste. We can now use the Pause key to turn on and off our Reshader effects, and the F11 key to turn off our ambient lighting. By doing so, you can see exactly what we've added to our installation thus far. Now it may not look that impressive, but once you add the high quality textures, it all really comes together nicely, and that's where we're going to go next. For that, we're going to go back to configuring Windower 4. Go ahead and log out of the game, and we'll move on to our next section. The next thing we're going to install is a tool that will allow us to more easily manage the textures that we're going to install in Final Fantasy XI. To get this, go to the web page listed here above, the URL of course being in the description, then click on the XIPivot_Windower link. Once downloaded, go ahead and extract the file like we have all the others. Once extracted, you will see a single XIPivot subfolder inside. Right-click on this subfolder and go to Copy. Next, go to the Windower 4 folder, so go to your quick access over there in the Windower 4 shortcut, then go to the Add-on subfolder. Here, you will want to right-click in the subfolder and hit Paste. Like usual, you'll be asked for permissions to do this. Go ahead and just hit Continue. To complete our XIPivot process, go inside of the XIPivot folder, then right-click, New Folder, and call that folder Data in all lowercase. Then right-click, create another new folder, and call this one DATS with a D, A, and T capitalized and S lowercase. Once you have finished that, you have finished the installation of XIPivot. Next, we're going to install the only texture modification that we can't install through XIPivot, and that is because it is loaded before the game actually loads. That is XIView. Now before we get into XIView, I want everyone to understand exactly what it does. It updates your GUI, status icons, menu icons, and other menus to work better with today's high-def displays in the 16:9 and 16:10 aspect ratios. So if you have a monitor with a ratio other than this, such as ultra-wide ratios, then this add-on is usually one that causes issues for you. You'll either need to try it and see how it works, and if you don't like it, uninstall it, or simply not use this one at all. The other thing to remember is that the files from this add-on, because of the way we install them, get overwritten several times a year when updates come out from Square Enix. So if after an update you notice that your status icons have reverted back to their defaults, go back to this web page. You should see an update that has just been released, download it, and reinstall it. Let's quickly talk about how to do that right now. As you can see here, you simply want to click on the code button and then download zip. Once it's downloaded, go to the download folder and extract all, just like we have with all the other zip files. Once extracted, you'll see an XIView master file. Go ahead and go inside of that. In there will be a ROM directory. That's where all the information is that we need. If you go inside of that, you'll see two directories, a 119 and a 280. The 119 will have 2 DATs in it, and the 280 will have 1 DAT in it. That's it. Just 3 files is all we're changing here. Go ahead and right-click on that ROM folder and go to Copy. You will then want to browse to your Final Fantasy XI folder, which will normally be found right next to your Play Online folder like you see here. Once inside this folder, you will see a whole bunch of ROM folders similar to the ROM folder that you just copied. You want to right-click in an empty area of this window and then click Paste. You should get a confirmation dialog that it's overwriting 3 files with the same name. Replace all of them in the destination. Check the box for do this for all current items, and then hit Continue. XIView is now installed. It's a very simple process, and just remember, you may need to do this about every other update when it changes your icons back to the default. At this point, you should be able to log right into the game and see the changes. The fonts should look much better on your HD resolution monitor in both the menus and the dialog boxes, and then additionally, things like mastered stars above your head should have a 3D effect to them. Now, as long as you've confirmed XIView is working or you've decided not to use it, you can then move on to the next step, which will be installing the high-quality textures. Now, texture packs include high-definition textures that change the way things look in the game. At this point, a few texture packs are out there, each with their own style, benefits, and downsides. I thought it would be a good idea to cover the differences between these packs and how to install the main ones so that you can install them and experiment and determine which one suits your taste best. I want to emphasize that you can use all, some, or none of these texture packs. I want to inform you on the differences and then let you make the choice on which you want to use. Now, the first texture pack I'm going to cover is really the first one that came out, and that is Amilila's texture pack. It was the first one, and it still remains one of the best. The pros are it's extremely small at only 600 megabytes to download and 2.2 gigabytes of space needed once unzipped. It is very lore friendly in that it doesn't change the way SE intended any of the zones to look, and it's the most resource friendly of the packs. However, it does have a few downsides, and that is that it only modifies a fraction of the textures in the game, which leaves many of the zones still looking like the default. Additionally, it hasn't been updated since 2019, so it doesn't look like we're going to be getting these updates anytime soon. However, because this plays so nicely with lower resource systems, I definitely wanted to point it out, as if you are on the lower end of the resource spectrum, then this is the resource pack that I suggest you start with to get an idea of how your system handles it. If you have no issues, consider installing the other packs if you wish. However, if this one's already bringing your system to your knees, it's doubtful you'll have any success with the other 2 packs I'm about to recommend. The next pack we're going to talk about is Ashenbubs. Now, Ashenbubs texture pack is relatively new, but easily the most comprehensive of the texture packs out there, as it upscales every texture in the game, over 240,000 of them. This is easily its biggest strength, as there's currently no other pack out there that does this. It's also lore friendly in that it doesn't change the way SE intended any of the zones or textures to look. It's also currently being updated pretty much every month, which is a big bonus. Now, there are some downsides, and that is the largest of the updates just because of all the stuff in it. In the end, it's going to take up either 10 or 25 gigs of space on your drive just for this texture pack, so make sure you have the room for it. 10 gigs for the lower quality version, 25 gigs for the higher quality version. The other thing I wanted to point out is the visual style of this pack is much different from any of the other high definition texture packs. It doesn't look so much high definition as it does just upscaled, which is of course what the Ashenbubs pack is. So keep this in mind. It either may be to your taste or not. So you may want to look at some of the examples I'm about to show and see if it's the pack you want to go with based on the way things look. Now the third and final texture pack I'm going to cover is my own. The NEXTGames texture pack is the one that I've been having people use for about the last year, and it's a combination of many packs and creators' work. It started with Amilila's pack, and then I started adding textures for all of the things not modified in her specific pack. At this time, this pack covers the majority of textures that you're going to encounter in the game. Now, this pack I specifically added textures to that complement each other, so everything in this pack should look very well and as if the game is complete in this high definition state. It's currently being updated every month as new textures are released by other great contributors such as Radial Arcana. Now this pack works best with the other alterations we made in this video, and better than the other two packs because this is of course the pack that I designed these changes around. Now let's go ahead and discuss some of the downsides of using my pack. First, I want to point out that it's not lore friendly. In that I mean certain zones like Eshin zones that should be black and white are now color and fully vibrant and in high definition. If this bothers you, this might not be the pack for you. It also requires more space than Amilila's pack, at requiring 7.3 gigabytes of space when fully unzipped. Now I want to make sure this is clear. This pack changes some textures to look entirely different than the default game. As previously mentioned, Eshin zones are in color. Things like the date shuriken looks like a grudge instead because I think that looked pretty cool, so note that texture modification has been made. Also things like core roll cards are entirely redone and much easier to read in their new style. Many of these changes are thanks to Radial Arcana on the FFXI forums, so thanks to him for his assistance in continuing to give us amazing high-quality textures. I also want to point out that you can use multiple texture packs at the same time, and I often do. Just remember that the texture pack that loads first is the one that will take precedence. So as previously stated, on a low-end system, I would recommend starting with just the Amilila texture pack and seeing how that goes. If you want a lore-friendly setup, I would use that texture pack in addition to Ashenbubs' standard definition pack, and that'll give you a good starting point. If you want the ultimate texture pack, I would use my NEXTGames texture pack followed by Ashenbubs HD to make sure that every texture is changed in the game and the majority of them are high definition. Next, I'm going to go ahead and show you how to download and install all 4 of these texture packs. Now keep in mind, you do not need to install all 4 of them. Only install and download the ones that you are intending on using and testing out. If you do install all of them, you're going to need 45 gigs for the unzipped data, so please check the drive that you have Windower 4 installed on and make sure you have enough space to install these texture mods before continuing. Now if you're planning on downloading and installing either Amilila's or Ashenbubs texture packs, both of them are encrypted using software that Windows 10 cannot natively de-encrypt. Therefore, we need to download a new application called 7-Zip. Note you do not need this if your only intention is to install the NEXTGames texture pack. To download and install 7-Zip, go to 7-zip.org and then click on either download link for 32-bit or 64-bit depending on your version of Windows. If you don't know, just go ahead and go with the 32-bit version. Once downloaded, all you do is select where you want to install it to. Normally the default is just fine, and hit install. It should install in just a few seconds. Now hit close. Now that we've done that, we can download and install Amilila's textures if you've chosen to do so. To do this, you can either follow the link in the video description or go to Amilila's channel, into her About tab, copy this URL, and then paste it in your browser. Once you're at this link, it is simply a Google download link, so you're not going to see anything fancy. Click on that blue download button. It'll then tell you it can't scan it for viruses because it's too large. That is known, and that's just fine. Go ahead and click on download anyway. This will download it to your computer. Now after you've finished downloading the file, you will want to go to your downloads folder and then right-click on the 7Z file that has been downloaded, and you should see a new 7-Zip context menu. If you go to this menu, you want to select the option that says Extract to, and then the full name of FFXI Megapack, etc. It will then unpack all of the contents of this file into that directory. After it's unpacked, we now need to actually go inside of this Megapack folder and do some maintenance in order to make this a usable texture update. The first thing you want to do is right-click in an empty part of the window and go to New Folder. Call this folder Amilila, A-M-E-L-I-L-A. You will now want to take the ROM, ROM2, and ROM3 folders and drag them into that new folder you've just created. Now go inside of the Mog Houses folder, right-click on the ROM folder, and go to Copy. Now go back up to the main folder, inside of Amilila, and paste it into that Amilila folder. Once again, go back outside, now into Ruan Gardens, copy the ROM2 folder. You now want to go back up again, go back into Amilila, and paste ROM2 in there. Once again, go back to your main directory, go underneath Sandoria Shops, right-click on ROM, copy. Now go back to your main Megapack folder, go underneath Amilila one last time, and paste. You now want to right-click on the Amilila folder that you've created, go to Copy, and now we're going to go ahead and browse to our Windower 4 directory, then Add-ons, XIPivot, then the Data subdirectory, and now DATS. Once inside of this subfolder, you want to right-click, paste in an empty area. You want to hit Continue when it asks for permissions, and then it'll paste the Amilila texture pack into this DATS folder. Now we need to enable this texture pack. To do so is actually quite simple. Go back to your Init.txt file. Now you may notice this file's changed a bit since we saw it a little bit ago. That's because last night I added some more details to my NEXTGame edit section explaining what each of these commands did, trying to help people in the future. In order to activate Amilila, we just need to go to the texture pack section of this Init.txt file, which happens to be lines 70 through 74. Here you will find the Pivot A Amilila line. You want to remove the slashes and space before pivot, and then go to File, Save. Now, the next time you load Final Fantasy XI, the Amilila pack will automatically load. Its installation is complete. Let's go ahead and move on now to Ashenbubs texture packs. Again, only install these if you've decided to do so. To install Ashenbubs texture packs, we need to go to the Nexus Mobs site. You can find the link for this, like everything else, in the description of this video. Once here, you will want to go to the Files section of his page. Here, you will find Ashenbubs' two versions of his texture pack, the Basic and the Prime. The Basic takes up a lot less room at only 10 gigabytes, with the Prime taking up 25 gigs. Obviously, the Prime also takes up a lot more system resources, so if you find yourself in a lot of endgame content, you may want to go ahead and use that Basic version to ensure that it does not slow it down. If you have enough room, you also have the option of downloading both, and therefore you can easily swap back and forth between them while in the game. Select Manual Download, and then click the Download button when it reminds you that XIPivot must be installed. Now it will give you the option of whether you want a slow or fast download. Unless you have a paid-for Nexus Mods account, you'll need to go with the slow download option, which will make it so that each of these packs take about an hour to download, so make sure you have time for that. Once it's finished downloading, you want to use the same process we did before with 7-zip, where you go to your Downloads folder, right-click on the downloaded Ashenbubs file, go to 7-zip, extract to, and the name of the file. If you've downloaded both of them after the first extraction finishes, go ahead and do the second just the same. Now once unzipped, it's the exact same process that we followed with Amilila if you happen to do that. And that is, you go inside of the folder, right-click on Ashenbubs HD-Basic, and go to Cut. I recommend Cut in this instance because it is so large, you don't want to take up twice the room. Now, go to the Windower 4 folder, Add-ons, XIPivot, Data, DATS. In here, right-click in an empty area and go to Paste. Because this is a cut, which is basically meaning a move operation, it should move very quickly. Next, go back to your Downloads folder. If you happen to download a second version of Ashenbubs, go ahead and go in there, right-click, cut just the same, go back into Windower 4, browse to that DATS folder, and paste it in an empty section again. Once again, because this is a move operation, it should happen very quickly. Once this is finished, all that's left to do is to activate it in the Init.txt file. Let's go ahead and go there now and accomplish that. Now, if you downloaded the basic one, you will want to remove the // space before it, and if you downloaded the Prime one, you will want to remove the space-based slash before it. Definitely don't ever use both at the same time, as that's just kind of a waste. And also remember, this sets the order for which these textures load in. So Amilila will load first, then Basic, then Prime, then NEXTGames, if, in fact, these were all active. Now, since Ashenbubs contains every texture in the game, it will basically overwrite any texture mods that are after it. Therefore, I suggest you put any texture mods that you would like to use in combination with Ashenbubs before it, like I've just done here for Amilila and NEXTGames. Remember, only the ones that have the / space removed in front of it are enabled. Now it's time to show how to download and install the final texture pack, my own. This one you can get from the NEXTGames channel underneath the About section. You can see a link there at the bottom, or you can simply click on the Google Drive icon that is in the banner. Once clicked on, it will bring you to a Google Drive download page where you can click on Download. It will give you a warning that it can't be scanned for viruses again. Go ahead and click on Download anyway, and it will download this 3.5 gigabyte file. After it finishes unzipping, it will show you all of the ROM folders inside of it. What you now want to do is go up one level so that you can see the NEXTGames folder that we've created. Right click on this NEXTGames folder and go to Copy or Cut to save space and speed up the move process. You will now want to go to the Windower 4 folder and browse to the XIPivot DATS folder like we have for all of our other texture mods and paste it inside of here. If you have done all 4 texture mods, you should now have 4 different folders in here. Obviously, if you've done fewer, that's how many you should see. Now, of course, we need to go activate this in the Init.txt file. Now, I'm going to go ahead and activate this for the way I normally play, which is having NEXTGames active and HD Prime active. Of course, for your situation, you'll have to decide exactly which one you have to have active in regards to which you have downloaded. That's going to be it. I wanted to finish this video before the 1 hour mark, so let's go ahead and take a few minutes to show you what all of our changes have done and the differences between the texture mods. In each one of these examples I show, I will first show you what it looks like in the default game, then show you what it looks like with Ashenbubs textures, and then show you what it looks like with my NEXTGames textures pack. While I continue to show you examples, I wanted to go over a few last minute things. First, make sure you look in the top pinned comment for this video. As the years go on, there may be things that change in this video that require updating or that aren't still accurate. I will put all of those notes in the top pinned comment to keep this video as accurate as possible for as long as possible. If you have any issues with this tutorial, be sure to post down there in the comments and I'll be sure to reply and see if I can help you get past whatever issue you are currently having. If this is your first visit to my channel, know that the NEXTGames channel creates game guides for some of history's best game franchises, including Final Fantasy, Assassin's Creed, Elder Scrolls, and Star Wars. Be sure to subscribe if you want to be notified as new content is released. I normally release at least a few Final Fantasy XI videos per week. If you have already seen some of the other game guides on my channel, you may be wondering where it is I get all of those add-ons, which ones I use, and how I configure them. Know that I've already created another game guide going over this topic in detail that you can find linked at the end of this video. I will also make a note in the comment section of my channel every time that I modify my NEXTGames texture pack so that people know to re-download it to take advantage of the new functionality. Now there are other texture packs out there and I'm sure more will be coming out, so you definitely may want to install some of those other texture packs. Doing so is just as simple as the ones we've just done. Simply download them, install them into the DATS folder in XIPivot. Make sure that you create a line entry for them to enable them in the Init.txt file, and then you should see them load in the game. Remember, if you are loading multiple textures at once, the ones with the higher, just remember that you will want to be sure to make sure that your texture file loads before other ones if you have those loading at the same time to make sure that yours takes precedent. Now, the last thing I wanted to show you is an example of what the core role cards look like and what the date shuriken looks like now that I've swapped the grudge texture file in place of its image. I wanted to make sure people knew exactly what I was talking about in regards to the specific changes in my texture pack. Okay, that should completely cover how to make Final Fantasy XI beautiful in 2021. I certainly hope you found that helpful. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. Please stay safe and stay healthy out there.